Electric vehicles have taken over the news cycle, especially when it comes to car reviews. But there's one class of car, the good old hybrid, that's been forgotten about, and you could say that it actually combines the best of both worlds. You get good old eco-friendly running on electricity alone, but you get the range that a petrol or diesel engine offers, and this Lexus ES300h has been updated to make it a little more relevant. Now, the updates might not be massive, but the current climate literally is. So we're going to find out in this road test if the ES300h can live up to its billing of actually going further on every litre of fuel through electric assistance. It's near impossible to tell the facelifted ES300h from the previous model, but look closely and you'll notice that the slats on the grille are beveled and reflect light in more interesting ways, while the headlights turn up ever so slightly at the corners. The 18-inch wheels have alternate polished spokes, though the previous car's hyper silver finish really was something to look at. All these years later, it's still a car that stands out on the road for its sheer size and sophistication. Now, while the cabin of the ES300h was a lovely place to be back when it was launched in 2018, in 2021, it feels its age. It feels a little dated. The biggest change for this model year, ES300h, is the fact that the infotainment screen has been brought closer, so you can actually reach out and touch the screen. There are a bunch of physical controls and all the materials feel superbly plush, and this wood paneling, I think, is my favorite thing on this thin rim steering wheel. Though the lower plastics sort of feel like they're from the mid-range Toyota, and it doesn't really match the rest of the image. Other changes include the inclusion of a wireless charging pad and new graphics for the digital instrumentation, but that's about it. We really can't say the cabin of the ES300h needed a big change though. It feels classically luxurious, even if it doesn't have glitzy ambient lighting, for example. It gets the fundamentals very right, from the superb insulation to seat comfort. The ES300h is also currently in a toss-up as to which of these luxury sedans have the best seats. My vote goes for the ES300h, especially the driver's seat. It's got extendable under-thigh support, just makes it feel like a Barca lounger, especially when you put your hands on the armrest on the central tunnel as well as the door pad. It's the perfect relaxed driving position, and the seats at the back, they're even better. There's more than enough headroom, thigh support and knee room, and there's even rear seat controls to move the passenger seat forward. All other controls, including for the climate control, are stored away in the central armrest, which makes getting to them with a middle passenger impossible. That said, the middle seat is a fairly comfortable seat, something which can't be said for too many other luxury sedans at the price. The boot may not be the largest, but the peace of mind of the full-size pair can't be matched. Interestingly, the Japan spec ES300h facelift moves to a more compact lithium-ion battery, which is said to improve boot capacity. However, the India spec cars continue with its nickel metal hydride battery pack, which is a good place to get into what drives the ES300h. Now, just to run through the specs on the ES300h, we're talking 178 PS and 221 Nm of torque from that 2.5 litre engine. And if you're thinking, those figures sound low, well, they are, because this engine isn't tuned for max performance, it's tuned for max efficiency. And of course, you've got that electric motor that's mounted on the front axle, helping the front wheels out with 120 PS of peak power and 202 Nm of peak torque. Put together, this should result in very impressive numbers on paper, but that's not the case. Lexus claim a combined output of 218 PS and they don't have a torque figure given. So that's because the two don't always work at their max outputs. It's a give and take, it's a calculation. The system is continuously monitoring how much power and torque the car actually needs. And that's why the max combined PS is rated at 218. While the outputs aren't segment leading, the Lexus stands out, and not in a good way, for having a CVT gearbox with paddle shifters. The Paddle shifters, however, work only for downshifts in the D mode and offer vaguely upshift-like sensations in the S mode, but more on that later. Diving right in, these near-silent getaways is what makes the Lexus ES300h such a revelation. The electric motor is paired to a 1.6 kilowatt-hour battery that's under the rear seat, and that might not seem like much, but it does mean you get pure EV mode at speeds under 50 kmph, and you feel it kick in every now and then, where most times getting away from traffic lights, you will pull away on pure EV power only. And the beauty of the whole system is how seamlessly the 2.5-litre inline-4 petrol engine joins in. And unless you're paying really close attention, you actually won't even realize when the petrol engine kicks in. That's how smooth the petrol engine is. When you're driving around like a regular person, the CVT keeps the engine at just the right revs where you often don't even hear it. And of the 3 drive modes, which are Power, Normal and Eco actually turned out to surprisingly be my favorite because it softens the throttle response and it just feels like the throttle becomes one big pillow where you step on it and you get these lovely smooth responses from the car. Sometimes it just feels like you're gliding along. The one thing that feels like it's keeping the ES300h from really realizing its full potential is the CVT. It does feel like it's sapping a little power, especially when you put your foot right down. You hear the rev shoot up and then you pick up pace. But once you get a move on, the speed does pile on quite rapidly. Of course, the flip side to that whole argument is that the CVT is what makes this Lexus so smooth and refined and so seamless to drive in the first place. Truth be told, it doesn't feel like it's underpowered. It does feel closer to the theoretical combined figures. Outright performance doesn't really feel slow. It did the 0 to 100 kmph dash in 8.9 seconds. Roll-on performance is about right for a car of this class, if a little slower. And I think that probably comes down to the fact that the CVT transmission has the typical rubber band effect, albeit in very little amounts. Under most driving circumstances, it's very smooth. And when you put your foot down, ask for a kickdown, you actually do get a little bit of that kickdown effect where you feel it drop a ratio, so to speak, and you shoot ahead, though the revs do rise pretty high while you wait for the speed to catch up. Of course, you probably want to know if the hybrid tech actually pays off at the fuel pump, and it definitely does. Now, we've known people who've owned this as well as the Toyota Camry Hybrid, which is essentially the same car, and they report very good efficiency in the city where the hybrid system has a chance to really work its magic. In our testing, the Lexus returned a stupendous 19 kmpl in the city and an even more surprising 20 kmpl out on the highway at speeds between 90 to 110 kmph. We were so surprised the car matched its claims, we repeated the test and we got similar results. But of course, your mileage may literally vary because it depends heavily on your driving style, how long your commute is, and what the state of charge is on the battery in the first place. Like I said, it's a 1.6 kilowatt-hour battery, so don't expect very long electric assistance range. And while the Lexus does have an EV-specific mode, it doesn't last very long, but it gives you all the assistance that you would need. Alongside that hybrid drivetrain, the NVH package really makes the Lexus eerily silent to drive around. Sometimes the only noise in the cabin feels like it's coming from the tires, and that's thanks to double glazed glass and active noise cancellation inside the cabin. Considering the ES300h rides on steel springs, the ride quality is actually a level beyond what you would imagine it to be. The suspension setup is very comfortable and takes care of most of the worst that our roads can throw at it. Though in typical Japanese car fashion, when you go over sharper bumps or the sharper edges of potholes, you do definitely hear it as a thud. Thankfully, the suspension setup isn't so soft as to ground out the car over speed breakers. With even 5 passengers on board, the ES300h managed to go over speed breakers without touching. The biggest surprise on the ES300h really is just how tight its turning circle is. It's 5.9 meters And for a car that's nearly 5 meters long on a 2.9 meter long wheelbase, it makes U-turns a cinch. This has to be one of the tightest turning luxury sedans in this segment. What's not a surprise then is that there's a fair amount of lean when you try and take corners at enthusiastic speeds, highlighting that this isn't what the Lexus was designed for. However, at anything less than all out, the dynamics are actually very predictable and confidence-inspiring. The drive modes also add a subtle but significant difference to the way that the steering weighs and feels, with Sport being the heaviest obviously, and Eco adding a wonderful fluidity that makes Eco again the choice of mode if I'm just going to be lazily motoring around. Ultimately, what the Lexus brings to the table is a supremely comfortable and relaxed driving experience, and a lot of tech that's packed under the hood, which is where it matters, not necessarily in the cabin. And if that's something that appeals to you, then the ES300h just might be the luxury sedan that you're looking for.